Oh,
Okay. Well, there's
so
me.
sophisticated.
Let's see if we can get Stephanie in there. I want to add to the right. Ah, there's Stephanie. And let's see if we
Hey,
can get Jeremy. There's Jeremy.
yay! Here we
Hey, we
are.
did
Yay!
it. We're getting a better grasp on all the technology here. Hopefully this is streaming on YouTube and on Facebook right now. But welcome everyone to the latest edition of or I should say, the next round of the Cocktail Apocalypse Happy Hour at the end of the year, end of the world. Um, and I'm Nick Mather. I should have my name up here. I'll worry about that in a minute. But I am joined, as usual, with the lovely and beautiful Stephanie Boudet and the lovely
Oh,
and beautiful Jeremy Anderson.
Woohoo!
Um, how are you?
Jeremy's far more lovely and beautiful than
I
I have
would
to
argue with
admit.
that point, but
Yeah, Jeremy's pretty. So how are you both doing today?
doing great. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing
Very
okay.
good.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I think. I don't know.
Okay.
I never know. So today we're talking about the New Age apocalypse, and I thought that it would be helpful to begin by kind of trying to define what the New Age is, because that's a tricky term.
Mhm.
But before we try to do that, I wanted to ask both of you how you think about the New Age. If you have a definition of it, or what does it entail? So when you hear New Age, what do you think? Jeremy, I'll start with you.
Mhm.
We'll go alphabetical. Anderson.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think of it as sort of an eclectic mix of spiritual practices that kind of started in the 70s,
Okay.
but it includes a lot of other things that are maybe older than that, like Astratu or Wicca.
Mm,
They're older than that, but they kind of fall into, for me, the New Age umbrella because they're kind of countercultural and kind of counter mainstream religious practice.
okay.
But,
Yeah.
but it's a focus on spirituality rather than religious structure in general. So most people can believe what they want to believe within the confines of the New Age practices.
Mm, okay. Good. Perfect. Stephanie, how do you think about it?
I kind of see it the same way, but I think I also see it as for a lot of it is taking some old spiritual practices and wrapping it up in
Mm-hmm.
a new sort of
Mm-hmm.
way, like taking like an old pagan practice and turning it into something new, um,
Mm-hmm.
new sort of practice. Like Wicca sort of falls into that. It's a
Yes.
neo pagan practice, or most practices today are neo pagan, right?
Yeah.
If they're
Mm-hmm.
taking from an old tradition. Um, but with the new age, I also see something like taking practice like Hermeticism and Gnosticism, which are very old practices, and turning it into something like the law of attraction, or the secret, which are um,
Mm-hmm.
almost bastardizations of the old practice. So I see a lot of that as well. So it is very a very eclectic sort of thing, but it's sort of a mishmash of so many things. It's hard to
Yeah.
really um, put it into even just one umbrella term. I
Mm,
Right.
think it's like it used to when you said the new age. I think you kind of all thought of astrology, tarot, and crystals, and that's what sort of people thought of new age. And I think now it's just like blossomed into this huge, massive thing, and
mm,
putting a name on it to me is very difficult. New age
Yeah.
is kind of a misnomer.
Right.
yeah. And I often wonder how used that term is now, because
Mm.
I don't know too many people that identify as New Age.
Right. Right.
I think the language now that you hear more often than not is spiritual but not religious.
Yes.
But I think those two things aren't the same thing. I don't
Hmm.
think the New Age is synonymous with spiritual but not religious.
Okay.
So I have a little bit of history here, but
Ooh.
and a lot of what has been said is very consistent with what I found in the research or whatnot. So what I did is I went to what used to be considered kind of like the New Age Bible, which was Marilyn Ferguson's The Aquarian Conspiracy.
Hmm.
And the title, of course, I think refers to this idea of the Age of Aquarius, which we're going to speak about later. I know Stephanie has a lot of things to say about that. But what Ferguson wrote was she didn't really give a clear definition of New Age, and she, I think, preferred this idea of the Aquarian conspiracy.
Hmm.
But what seemed to be central to what she was writing was this idea of a paradigm shift. So instead of New Age,
Hmm.
she was talking about a new paradigm, a new way of understanding the world or seeing the world. And this was a shift from the Western materialistic perspective and the Abrahamic tradition perspective to a where it was more personal, and there was this connection between personal and social transformation, but it was all centered on the idea of consciousness, a transformation of consciousness.
Hmm.
And so that brought in things like psychedelics, um, meditation. So you pulled from a lot of the Eastern traditions, but there's a history
Right.
to that as
Right.
well.
Hmm.
So she also noted, as Stephanie was saying, that there's this kind of retrieval or a going back
Right.
and claiming things from, like the Gnostics and the Hermeticists and Kabbalah and the alchemists, even. And that's one of the ideas that I see coming up a lot. And there's like a technical term for it, which is like the Prisca Theologia, where there's this idea that there was a common theme in all the traditions that occurs throughout time, but it kind of gets lost in the muddied waters of things, and so there's always this attempt to like retrieve it, and I think that's part of it. The first mention or the first use of the term New Age in a spiritual context actually occurred in 1864. And it was with the writings of Warren Felt Evans, who was a Methodist minister in New England. And he wrote a book titled The New Age and Its Messenger. And the messenger for him was Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a Christian mystic. I don't know anything about Emanuel Swedenborg, unfortunately. Do either of you have any knowledge of Swedenborg?
Nope.
No. Jeremy?
Nope. Sorry.
Okay. Yep. So, audience, we're at a loss on that one.
Right.
I know
But
that
post
Gary.
something in the chat if you know something.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I know is that he was a mystic. Then the next, and this I think is really important for what we're doing here. The next mention was there was a Christian socialist publication that was in 1894 as a weekly publication called The New Age. And that is, I think, connected to a larger movement that began in the United States of the social gospel. And the social gospel, there were a couple of things that kind of define the social gospel. One was it was not a literalist interpretation of biblical texts. Most of the people involved with it were informed of what's known as like the higher criticism, who wrote the Bible. Instead of Moses, it was, J, E, P, and D. And they then focused on the teachings, that what was important was the teachings of Christ. And it was the ideas of social justice. And I know Stephanie has some information that she can share with us here, but I always get a little bit confused with these ideas of postmillennialism and premillennialism. But the idea of the social gospel was you had to create the conditions in society that would allow for Jesus to return. So it was this attempt to eradicate sin, and what the focus was on was, I think, at one point, abolition, the right for women to vote, not quite equal rights yet, but at least that right. But they also went after like alcohol, and so prohibition was one of the results of the social gospel. But it was influential for a long time, and there's a whole story to kind of how it kind of vanished. But it even influenced Martin Luther King Jr. Stephanie, I think you have a lot to add here.
Yeah, this was the post-millennial movement, and this was exemplified by like groups like the Millerites. This is a pre-Civil War movement that came out, and they really believed that in order to bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth, the New Jerusalem, you had to perfect society first. Before Jesus would return, you had to, eradicate poverty. You had to eradicate the evils of society, like alcoholism. So there was that prohibition movement. You had to eradicate slavery. You had to, so there was a very strong anti-slavery movement at this time. You had to do all the things to perfect everything in this world. And once you've done that, the kingdom of heaven would return, and there would be a new Jerusalem, and Jesus would return, and all would be right with the world. And that went on pretty much until the Civil War. And once the Civil War happened, that movement kind of collapsed into a more of a depression about that, because of this apocalyptic Civil War time that just was devastating. So that's really what ends that idea. And then you get more of a what's known as a premillennial aspect starts to arise, where there's nothing that can be done. We have to wait for God to do this work for us, and God's going to sweep all this away, and there's like really nothing we can do. We just have to wait.
So that's when people kind of gave up.
Yeah.
Put in God.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we have different movements that come out again in the next century. I don't want to get too far ahead of where Nick is, but in the next century, usually or during the 60s in the 20th century, where you get this movement again towards changing things. And that's where we get another Aquarian idea too, if we want to get both during the Jesus movement during that time, and during the more of a New Agey movement of perfecting society again, and eradicating all those wrongs.
Yeah, thank you. That actually is incredibly helpful, and I think I actually have even a better idea now of what postmillennialism and premillennialism means. I think it always kind of confused me, but the way you described it, I think, is perfect, so I have a better understanding. So I think that New Age, with that context, fits in within a Abrahamic tradition in many ways, because it's kind of rooted in this notion of apocalypse, right? At least from this Methodist minister's point of view. I think the one thing that I want to add now that's, I think, really important for the whole concept of the New Age as we understand it now is, you mentioned the Civil War. And there was so much devastation at the Civil War that there's a movement that happens, and it's still around a little bit, of spiritualism. And that begins, I think, around 18 in the mid 1800s with the Fox sisters in upstate New York, where their parents moved them into this farmhouse, and there were apparently rumors about the house being haunted, and they began experiencing these knocks and communications with spirits. And that led to this whole movement of being able to speak with the dead. And I think that after the devastation of the Civil War, the ground was fertile for that because people wanted to speak with the ones that they've lost. But this, I think, leads to one of the things that's really common in New Age thought, which is channeling. That we can start speaking with disembodied spirits and whatnot. So I think that that's an important aspect to this, because the next step is with the introduction of Madame Blavatsky, who founded the Theosophical organization. And she thought of what she was doing, like theosophy, as a merging of science and spirituality. And she thought that these ideas were meant to save the world from this reductive materialistic paradigm. And she is the one, I think, that began really pulling in a lot of ideas from Asian religious traditions. My understanding is she and Henry Olcott were the first people from like the United States to officially convert to Buddhism on an official level. But she also channeled, and this is kind of problematic, but the Great White Brotherhood and Hoot Kumi, which was a disembodied Tibetan. And I don't think that Hoot Kumi is an actual Tibetan name. It sounds like someone trying to come up with a Tibetan name. But I think that my next cat, I'm going to name Hoot Kumi. I think that'll be awesome.
That would be.
Although my neighbors will probably think I'm a racist or something if I'm not yelling for Hoot Kumi. There's just something that sounds inherently racist about that. I don't know what it is. But then we get Alice Bailey. And I know that some people like to suggest that Alice Bailey is the person who popularized the idea of a new age, but that's not true. The term, we've shown has been in use. I think what she popularized was the idea of the age of Aquarius. And Alice Bailey, she died in 1949, so she was born in 1880. She died in 1949. Blavatsky, I think, died in like 1891. So this moves us, Alice Bailey moves us into the 20th century at least. And this idea of the age of Aquarius, which seems to be really central to New Age thought. So what in the world is the age of Aquarius?
Take it away, Stephanie.
Oh, okay, that's my cue. All right.
Yeah.
Wow. To talk about the age of Aquarius, I think we have to back up, because the age of Aquarius assumes there was an age before that, right? What's the age before that? Well, astrological ages are really hard to define, because we're not quite sure where the cutoff dates are of astrological ages. So let me just say that the astrological age is defined by the Earth's rotational axis in relation to the constellations of the zodiac. So, and it goes backwards. Because of course.
Countercultural.
Yeah, right. And basically, it then is said to influence cultural values of that era. And the durations of these astrological ages are vast. So it's about 2,160 years for each astrological age. So you can see this is a large swath of time.
Hmm.
And you have to take it with a grain of salt. It doesn't begin and end on a dime. And you kind of have to see them overlapping. You could see them as a cusp period, and then you have to take into consideration that not all astrologers agree on the beginning and ending of an age. There are different uh, types of astrology. Different cultures came up with different types, and while they kind of are similar, they're also, they have differences. So, we have Vedic astrology, we have Western astrology, we have Hellenistic astrology. So you have to kind of take some of this with a grain of salt as what defines an age.
Mm.
But if we kind of go with the idea that it's about a little over 2,000 years, you're kind of in the right space. Um, so I thought maybe we'd go back a little bit. So the age that we're thought to currently still be in, um, if the age of Aquarius hasn't actually arrived yet, is the age of Pisces. And the age before that would have been the age of Aries, and before that would have been the age of Taurus. So I'm going to just um, start a little bit with what this means. So the age of Taurus, uh, we'll start with first. That would have been around uh, 4300 BCE to 2150 BCE. And the age of Taurus would have been exemplified by the Bronze Age. It would have been the rise of the city states. So, what's the age of Taurus? What does that mean? Taurus on the zodiac is represented by the bull. It's an earth sign. It is a fixed sign. So, what does that mean? Well, it means that it's about building structures. It's slow. Um, it's about the slow, steady building of structures. It's ruled by Venus, so it's about beauty. It's about um, things that are desirable, things that are worth building. So if we look at that, what happened during the Bronze Age, we would say that, okay, what happened then? Well, we invented writing. This was the time of the rise of the Indus Valley civilizations. So it's about building structures, building city states, building structures that will last. Um, and again, like the invention of writing. At this time, Egypt is rising, Sumer, all those civilizations that we remember and remember for their aesthetic qualities. This is where we have the first writings of written down music, all Venusian types of quality. Let me think. Oh yeah. Also interesting. This is where we get the rise of the bull cults, and this is like in India, where you have the rise of the sacred cow. Um,
Oh.
this is also happening in Greece and Egypt. So
Can I interject something here
yeah.
with that? David Ulansey, who's a specialist in the Mithraic cults. I forget the term, but there's this very famous image of Mithras and a bull. And there are some other symbols that always appear. And what he argued is that is actually representing the age of Taurus, but moving into the next age, because Mithras is kind of killing the bull. And so that is just another example of how the bull is represented in this astrological idea of
Mhm.
this precession of the equinoxes, right?
Yes, yes. Um, and also, what we'll see with each of these is as you get to the cusp, you see these blurring of the lines, right?
Mm.
Because there's no real cutoff, right? It just kind of blurs once you get to those edges. As we go to the next period from 2150 BCE to the 1 CE, which again, take that with a grain of salt. You kind of enter here. You enter the age of Aries, and Aries is uh, ruled by Mars. Mars is the planet of war, uh, and it's a fire sign. It's also a cardinal fire sign, so it starts things, it gets things going. And here you have the rise. This is the beginning of the Iron Age. This is the rise of the empires. So you have the Akkadian Empire, um, the Phoenician Empire, the Greek Empire. All of these are rising at this time. Um, this is also the beginning of the Vedic period in India. Um, this is the time of the classical antiquity period. So you have um, your uh, Iliad and Odyssey is written at this time. Your classic Greek mythology has come about during this time. So it's very much typified by this empire where it's no longer just the city state, it's now the cities going out and conquering and creating these vast
You're freezing on us,
war and
Stephanie.
conquest.
Yeah.
Conquest.
So patriarchy,
I'm,
lots of
I'm
patriarchy
sorry.
here. Patriarchy, lots of patriarchy here.
Yeah, patriarchy has yes, um, and also at the cusp of this, right before we enter the age of Pisces, at the cusp we start seeing the rise of Buddhism.
Mm.
Um, and some of these religions of the axial age,
Mm.
the Christianity, Zoroastrianism start arising. And then we sort of slide into the age of Pisces. Pisces is typified. Pisces is a water sign. It is ruled by it's ruled by two planets. It's ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. So it is Jupiter is the planet of expansion and abundance. Neptune is the planet of dreams, imagination, mysticism. And both of these are also, you could see religion in both of them, mysticism. And here we have also the rise of the Roman Empire. Roman empires had already really started, but now it's in full swing. Here we have Christianity, uh, Islam, the monotheistic religions have really come about. Um, and and one of the things that I really see here is the expansion of these religions. We're no longer in a period of tribal religions,
Mm.
but
Mm-hmm.
expansive religions that go about all over the world. And of course, we have the Holy Roman Empire. And if we go further into our current era, we have the American Empire, we had the British Empire, we had um, just this age of empire and religious expansion. Um, and here we are now moving into this age of Aquarius. Um, so, what does Aquarius mean? Well, Aquarius is a sign ruled, also has two rulers. It's ruled by Saturn and Uranus. So, Saturn is the planet of structure and restriction. And Uranus is the planet of freedom and just like radically changing things. Um, and it seems like a little bit of a contradiction. So it seems like with the age of Aquarius, we're in for some real radical changes in our world. It's
Right.
What is typified by the age of Aquarius is humanitarianism, um, changing the structures, like looking at the structures for what they are, because Saturn is a planet of structures, but Uranus is about tearing them down. So it's like, okay, we have to look at the structures as they are, recognize that they're not really great, tear them down, change them, and then put something else in place. So that's where you're looking at there. But it's also like Saturn is an air, or sorry, not Saturn. Aquarius is an air sign. Um, so that's a lot of people think it's a water sign, but it's actually about the water bearer. So it's an air sign. Um, and it's about, if you ever seen the sign, the glyph for Aquarius, it's two wavy lines. So it's about connecting the heavens and the earth together. So that's where you get that humanitarian aspect to it, where you reconnect the heavens to the earth. And it's this idea of, we got to make things right, we got to make things better. It's also about the outsider, who can either be the explorer or the exile. So it's got all these sort of ideas of humanitarian compassion, unconditional love associated with it. But from that sort of Saturnian, don't get too close kind of way. It's very much a love you from a distance kind of way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's what I have for you right now. If anyone wants to jump in.
That's perfect, and I know that the Pisces age kind of associated with Jesus, and so it seems like the Aquarian is kind of moving away from the traditional sort of Abrahamic traditions.
Yeah, I think it's really about breaking down those old structures. That's that Uranian aspect of it, coming through and switching gears and hey, this isn't working anymore. We got to try something new. And it's not necessarily throwing everything out, but it can be.
Well, it's connected to this idea of transformation for sure. But one of the other things we're going to talk about, and I have a segue here, which I think works, is that when we talk about the age of Aquarius, I know that it was really popular in the 60s. It was the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
Right.
And it just occurred to me that the people that sang that were the fifth dimension. And
yes.
Now we have this whole idea of 5D consciousness.
Yeah.
How's that for a segue?
Oh,
Wow.
that's great. Great, great. I think I'm going to backtrack a little on some of it because it does seem like right now we're in this cusp period of turning, like last episode we did was on AI, right?
Right.
Right.
So so we have this cusp period because one of the ideas of the Aquarian age is moving more towards communications,
Mm.
digital, um, moving out of this materialism and moving more
Mm,
towards this airy aspect of it, which is this non-material digital aspect of our lives, right? And what's more typified than, like, we're all using computers right now. Everything that we're doing is based on airwaves. Um, and it's like the Aquarian is going to say, well, we have to build structures for this. We have to build more rules and laws that govern how we use AI.
right.
How we use, we have to think of this in a more fair way that's going to make sure that we're all treated well. And we have to do it now. So, anyways, I thought that was a good segue from last episode that we did
Yeah.
into now, because that is exactly what the Aquarian would say we have to do. You know,
Yeah.
so
Right.
Yeah. And I've got
there are other aspects. I keep forgetting things.
yeah. Well, I actually have something else I can bring in. However, I think that this may be it's a little bit early, but not too bad. A good time. Jeremy has concocted a special recipe for us, the Age of
Yeah, I don't.
Rumquarius.
Yeah, Age of Rumquarius. Can't say I concocted it, but I
Uh,
modified somebody else's cocktail, and
yeah.
nobody knows the origin of this one, so that's kind of
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, I haven't watched the entire video. Did you just like plop crystals in?
No, I swapped out the mezcal for rum. That's what I did.
Okay, I find that yeah. I'm sorry, I can't. Yeah, I am a fan of mezcal, so that I don't know,
Uh,
Jeremy. I'm like, oh, I don't
well,
know if that's a good thing or not. Uh,
right. Embrace the change. Embrace the change. It's the new age.
yeah. Um,
Oh, it looks wonderful. I watched the video. I thought it looked really good.
Thank you.
yeah. I'm trying to find here where I can pull it up. I had it set up, and now it
Mm,
seems to be.
start
I don't know
breaking
where
down
it is.
communication.
I know. Well, and Mercury's not even retrograde. Um, but here I can. You two chat while I get this set up. Um,
That seems to be the one thing everyone knows, right? No matter what you know about astrology or the New
Hmm.
Age, everyone knows Mercury retrograde.
Right, right. It's become a cultural thing, not just an astrological thing.
Yeah, and that's another thing about new anything to do with the New Age. People understand things now about astrology that, like, even 10 years ago, nobody understood. Like,
Hmm.
people don't just know their birth sign; they know their birth sign, rising sign, and moon sign.
Wow, I feel
Yeah.
behind the times. All
okay.
right,
You're
hold on.
so behind, Jeremy.
Let's make an Age of Rumquarius.
Sorry. Oh.
Let's make an Age of Rumquarius. Hi, I'm Jer. Welcome to Kill Devil, where we focus on rum and cocktails. Today we are going to make what I call an Age of Rumquarius. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning to the channel, welcome back. In either case, I really appreciate you being here, and I hope you learned something interesting. Note that I'm not a professional bartender. While I did do a little bit of bartending as an undergraduate, that was at a dive bar where we did pitchers of beer and really simple drinks like rum and cokes, gin and tonics, things like that. Nothing that I would call a fancy cocktail. I didn't get into cocktails until much later. I'd gotten a little tired of drinking all the Coca-Cola in my rum and cokes, and I wanted to know if there's something else I could do with rum. My first couple of cocktail adventures were pretty questionable, but eventually I started making stuff that were pretty good. And then I opened the rum bar in the backyard. Neighbors came over, I tried my cocktails on them, and they seemed to really like them as well. Note that to me, making a cocktail is about making community. I do it to make myself happy. I'm part of the community. I do it to make my wife happy. She's a big part of the community. And I do it to make my friends and family happy. And hopefully, if you like these cocktails, you can make them for your friends and family as well. I call this drink the Age of Rumquarius because it is based on a drink called the Age of Aquarius, which has sort of a new agey theme, the Age of Aquarius. I got this drink from the Educated Barfly. Link to his website and YouTube channel will be down below. But note that the Educated Barfly does not remember where they got this cocktail from. And searches online always point back to his website. So we don't know the origin of this cocktail. The Age of Aquarius is actually a mezcal-based cocktail. And what I did was I swapped out the mezcal for a rum, and now it is an Age of Rumquarius. A note on the rum. The Age of Aquarius was based on mezcal, and mezcal is smoky, which you may describe as savory, so I wanted to do something savory with my rum, so I went with Par Nubes. If you do not have access to Par Nubes, which is a very savory rum, feel free to try any rum that you like in this cocktail, and if you find something that works really well, let me know what it is in the comments down below. To make this drink, I'm going to start with my Par Nubes, my rum, 1.5 ounces, which is 45 milliliters, right in the shaker. 3/4 ounces of passion fruit syrup. 3/4 ounces is 22.5 milliliters. 3/4 ounces of fresh squeezed lime juice, 22.5 milliliters. And 1/4 ounce of honey syrup. And I do make my own honey syrup recipes here on the channel. Link will be down below if you want to check it out. 1/4 ounce is 7.5 milliliters. Then I'm going to get a whole lot of ice. Now that I have my ice, I'm going to put some in my shaker, and I'm using my hand. It's okay. Get over it. We're hippies. We're dirty hippies. New age and all that. And I'm going to give it a shake. Now I'm going to let this sit for just a moment because I need to crush some ice. I'll be with you in just a moment. Now that my ice is crushed, I'm going to fill the glass about 3/4 of the way. And this is a Collins glass. That's a little bit more than 3/4, but you'll forgive me. I hope you'll forgive me. Anyway, I'm going to now strain this into the glass. Collins glass, lowball, pint, whatever you want to use. And because I'm using crushed ice, it will trickle down slowly. Now I'm going to top this off with some more ice. Crushed ice, that is. And 1/2 ounce Campari float. 1/2 ounce is 15 milliliters. And note that sometimes I get my proportions wrong. There it is. I'll stop this before it overflows. And by proportions, I mean ice versus liquid. Sometimes this overflows. And this is going to be a float, so I'm going to pour it gently. And my wife describes this as a beautiful cocktail. Yeah, see, that's right to the lip there. So I'm going to stop there. Mint for garnish, give it a whack. Tuck it in. Add a straw. And there you have it. An Age of Rumquarius. Drink with good spirits. Question of the day. Do you know Par Nubes? If you do, what do you use it for? Let me know in the comments down below. Note that there are ways to support the channel if you're so inclined. There are social media links down below. Feel free to click on any of those and follow me on any of those. If you've made it this far, might as well give me a like, especially if you like Par Nubes. And if you really like what I'm doing, give me a subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything that I'm doing. Finally, I have t-shirts. If you want one, contact me and we'll make sure you get one. Cheers.
Awesome. Now I want that.
We'll see.
And we can make it with mezcal for you, Nick.
Yes, please.
Well, what I really loved about that is how you talked about how important it was with community. Mm-hmm. And community is such an important part of Aquarius. So that fit in so well just to talk about the community like you did.
Unintentional tie-in. Yeah. And to me, that's what really even happy hours are about, is meeting with friends and hanging out and talking about things. But that's
Yeah.
another subject, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's pertinent to the what we're doing here. It's a happy hour on Saturday afternoon. But it's happy hour in France, or somewhere. It's always happy hour somewhere. But yes, like Jeremy's channel and share and subscribe. I think that's important. We'll put a link for that video in the show notes. In the video description when we're done with this. But yeah, I think the community is important because that is part of this idea of the age of Aquarius, as like Marilyn Ferguson was thinking about it in terms of social transformation. That it starts with the individual, but then when the individual transforms, then that can lead. It has a ripple effect, I think, in terms of the larger communities. So social transformation, but again, that individual transformation is a transformation of consciousness. So let's go back to 5D. I will be honest, whenever I hear people talking about this shift to 5D consciousness, my eyes roll for a number of reasons. One is I'm like, what the hell do you even mean? And if we're talking about, 5D, that's 5-dimensional consciousness, I'm like, we don't even know what the hell consciousness is. How can we talk about dimensions of consciousness? It just makes absolutely no sense to me. But I think it's just a different way to describe something that has a long history to it. It's just this idea of a transformation of consciousness. Right. Which is, I think, this idea as well as, going into a new paradigm. But what really bothers me, I think, is you hear people who are like, well, I'm tapped into the 5D consciousness, and all these people over here are still in 3D consciousness.
Right,
and number one, I'm like, well, what about 4D? We don't really hear anything about 4D consciousness.
We do, though.
Do we?
We do.
We do?
Yeah.
Oh.
They do talk about it.
All right.
It's just not as important.
Yeah, well, so they don't sneer at the 4D people as much as they sneer at the 3D people, because I find a lot of judgmentalism in there. Oh yeah,
4D people are the middle children of the consciousness spectrum.
Yeah.
We're just kind of ignored.
Yeah, but yeah. I still don't know, other than a transformation of consciousness, I have no clue what 5D consciousness is. I mean, maybe when I've eaten enough mushrooms, perhaps, but I never refer to that as like a 5th dimensional consciousness.
Honestly,
so anyone watching this, put it in the chat or put it in the comments down below. If you know what 5D consciousness is and you're looking down your nose at us, please let us know.
No, I've everything I've read on 5D consciousness is, first of all, it really depends on where you're sitting as to what you think it is, because everyone's got a different idea about it. And there are people who take it very literally and see it as something that is, you got to get there or you're going to be left behind. And this is really how they speak. It really resembles a lot of the Christian fundamentalist idea of the rapture.
Right.
Where, you got to get to this 5D consciousness, which is all about unconditional love, which is nice. It's a good thing. But it's like raising your vibration to this all-accepting 5D, all oneness. It's when you think about it, it's a beautiful idea. But it's the fact that it's actually spoken of in exclusionary terms and exclusiveness kind of misses the point of
Right,
what they're
right.
talking about.
Hmm.
If you don't do it, you're going to miss the boat and you're not going to get
Right.
to 5D Earth. Some people talk about it in terms of like, we're all going to get there, we're all going to get new bodies, and we're all going to be
Mm.
in these light bodies. And we're going to be in light Earth, light 5D Earth. Um, Other people talk about it in terms of when we die, we're going to have, if we've reached this 5D consciousness, we will then go to this 5D Earth. Like 5D Earth is this heaven Earth. And
Mm.
so
So
that's
are
the
they
way it
Mormons?
works. No, because
Oh,
Mormons get a different planet.
Oh, I
right.
see.
Um,
But
they
theirs
get
is
their
like
own planet.
yeah, but it's a 3D planet.
Right.
I don't know.
4D, 4D.
I don't know. I'm going to be honest
Be-
with you. I don't know. I don't know.
So,
We're not
so let's
Well,
talking
talk
about
about
Mormons right now, Nick.
should we talk about dimensions quick though?
about the what?
The four dimensions of space-time? Because we
Yeah, the
are currently
fourth
living in
dimension.
four is time. The fourth dimension
Mm.
is time. We're currently
Yeah.
living
Yes,
in
and
four
that's
dimensional.
that's how they see it. They see for the fourth dimension as the astral plane. And so like if you're able to astral travel, that's the fourth dimension. That's 4D. And
Mm.
that's better, but it's not 5D. It's not like this consciousness of pure unity and love, peace, and
Mhm.
rainbows.
Right.
Um,
Beyond space-time.
yeah. Um, and even 5D is not the final place. 5D is just what we can conceive of. There's actually 12, 12
Does that
dimensionals,
come
but
does that come from string theory by chance?
I don't know.
Okay, okay.
I
Never
don't.
mind then.
It probably depends on who you talk to. Um, so so you have like two different ideas there of what 5D is. For some, it's something you can achieve now in this life. Others, you have to die, and then you'll get to that as your reward. And then there are others who are, no, that's all metaphorical. 5D is just this different consciousness that we all need to reach. To me, it sounds more like a post millennial idea of um, perfecting our lives here,
Mm.
so that we can raise our consciousness, raise
Right.
what what structures we have here on Earth, so that we can transform the Earth.
Right.
I don't know. It sounds to me sort of like I don't know if you all have all read or know the idea of the 100th monkey, where if
Mm.
you raise enough consciousness, that it will just spread. It will spread
Hmm.
out. It's like a contagion,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and then once enough people have raised the Earth's
Right.
consciousness level,
Little
Earth
shift.
goes to 5D. There's a
Yeah.
shift, and we're all
Hmm.
in this 5D new Earth. It's not like Earth has changed in terms of its structure, but
Right.
that we're all thinking like this, and we are all now in harmony, and we all think as one, and we're not killing each other,
Hmm.
and life is better. So these are three different ways that you can look at 5D.
Right.
Um, but it's all about this. If you think about it, it's very apocalyptic, because
Right.
it's a complete change of how this world operates, how it works. And it's all beautiful and nice, but in one way, it's very exclusionary. In the one way of thinking of it, if it's literal, well, we're ascending and the rest of you are left behind. And you have
Right.
to stay on this 3D Earth, which is condemned to war and horribleness.
Hmm. Right.
And the rest of us ascend and sayonara.
Hmm.
We're off. Yeah.
Well, isn't this the rapture
But
then?
kind of, yeah. I don't see it as
So
different.
Right, because one of the things I was pretty deep in the New Age movement. I do shamanism. I know a lot of people that do a lot of other spiritual practices, and one of the reasons I started distancing myself from it because a lot of it just seemed to be reskinned Christianity. They're saying the same sorts of
Yeah,
things but using different language. Again, the exclusion, etc. So if it's not
I would
really
agree.
that difference, have we actually made that shift in consciousness?
It's a good
That's a
question.
good question, and I would say no,
Hmm.
because you can't. To me, you can't be exclusionary,
Right.
Right.
and I would actually say we are heading towards something in which a shift in paradigm might be occurring, but I don't think it's exclusionary. I think it's all encompassing. We're all going to go through something,
Right.
and it's probably not going to be all that pleasant.
Right.
But we will, and I'm not saying we as like the people who are sitting here right now, but as a social collective, we will emerge on the other end something different.
Definitely.
But what is that going to be? I hope it's good, but
Hmm.
I don't. I think you're right. Once you start seeing things as exclusionary, I'm going to get this and you're not, then you missed the whole point.
Right.
Well, that's always, I think, part of a problem in the sense that, you know, because people who claim to be operating on this 5D consciousness, I always, there's a part of me that always wants to say, look, I've eaten so many mushrooms and so much acid in my life. I'm operating on like level 9 over here, so shut up. Um,
Buckaroo Banzai.
but I mean, you can't claim 5D consciousness until you've seen the self-transforming machine elves, right? And had good conversations with them. Um, but no, I don't remember where I was going with this. I'm always suspect of anyone who claims to be on a different level of consciousness,
Right.
because it's the same thing of people who make claims of being awake
Or old
and
souls.
yeah, or enlightened. And
Hmm.
I always, my go-to quote comes from Thoreau, where he says, I've never met a man who was quite awake. If I had, how could I look him in the face? And so if anyone makes a claim that they are, operating in this 5D consciousness, or that they're awake or enlightened, I'm like, probably not. Uh,
Right.
but I agree that I think that there is probably a change, and maybe this is individual, on some aspect. I'm gonna say, and I've talked about this in my podcast, so I'll maybe talk about this here in terms of the whole idea and the concept of a paradigm shift,
Hmm.
because I think that really comes from the work of Thomas Kuhn,
Hmm.
and his book that was released in '67, "The Structures of Scientific Revolutions."
Hmm.
And what Kuhn was saying is that science operates on paradigms, and the
Hmm.
paradigms are the axioms, in a way, the assumptions that science makes, and that those assumptions and axioms can change with new evidence. And so, one example is we went from a geocentric universe where the Earth is at the center,
Hmm.
but there's always an anomaly. There's always something that the
Right.
paradigm can't answer. And
Hmm.
what that paradigm couldn't answer was retrograde of planets, because if everything's going around the Earth in perfect circular orbits, and it had to be perfect circular orbits because Plato said so.
Right.
How do you account for the observation that planet like Mercury, when you're watching it go through the night sky, it seems to stop and go backwards, right?
Right.
Hmm.
And so that ended up giving birth to a new paradigm, which is the heliocentric. And, then we can say, well, then there was the Newtonian paradigm, and then there's the Einsteinian paradigm, if you will. But the paradigm that we are in is essentially this reductive materialistic paradigm where everything is matter. And there's no inherent meaning to anything. It's just matter. And consciousness is a byproduct of matter. But no one can explain that. And I think that that's the anomaly. I think consciousness is the anomaly that's going to get us into a new paradigm, trying to answer that.
The age of Aquarius.
Yeah, exactly.
That's perfectly right. But I'm not sure if it's in Kuhn, but it's not just that the scientific material or the scientific information changes. You have to have the social awareness comes to a point that brings us to the ability to make that change. Because if we all remember our Galileo of that wasn't the right time for certain changes to occur. So we actually have to be in a moment, a zeitgeist of being able to have that momentum to move us forward. And we're kind of in a period of resistance to any sort of movement, whether the science says it or not. So there's this tension between the science and the social structures of the time. And that's always been the case.
Is that Saturn and Uranus working counter each other there?
Yeah, there does seem to be this tension between the two, but if we look at our astrological charts, there's Uranus is now more free to before you had Saturn stepping on its tail, and now it's free to go smash the system.
Nice.
So it looks like we'll probably start seeing more movement if we're all into the astrology of the moment. But
talk about temple woo.
Temple woo.
Yeah, and I got that phrase. I just want to make clear from Darren Durda, guest that I had on the podcast, and the author of the New Age Wasteland. Yeah, and one of the things that I think is kind of happening to this extent, or that I see happening, but I exist on the fringes because I'm 9D consciousness. I'm just gonna claim that I'm 9D consciousness.
Are you 9D right now? Is that where you're at night, or are you out of the rafters a little bit?
No, I'm always in the rafters. I'm always in the rafters, Steph. You should know that about me by now. I mean, I don't see the elves coming out, but they can show up at any second.
I'm waiting for them.
Yeah.
Gonna smash them.
No, don't do that.
Well, you might like it.
Yeah, no, I'll introduce you to them eventually.
Right.
But, I guess the point I want to make, because I want to try to take this back to our understanding what the New Age is. And I think it's pretty clear that there is an apocalyptic aspect about, I mean, even in the name, New Age, it seems to be apocalyptic.
Yes.
And I think as we've kind of understood here that it is really grounded in kind of the Western Abrahamic traditions, especially Christianity, that there is going to be this sort of apocalyptic event. But what I see as the most interesting aspect of this is not necessarily the machine elves, but the goblins. That it's in Psi, PSI, right? That there's been a lot of research that seems to have demonstrated very clearly that human consciousness is way weirder than what we think, and that certain psi phenomena exist. And so much of the paradigm that we exist in, you get people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's like, nope, it just doesn't happen. There's no evidence, but there is evidence. There's over 100 years worth of evidence that demonstrates this stuff. But I think that is going to become a little bit more mainstream. I think that information is going to seep into the greater culture. But then the question is, how far do you go? Because that's giving us a different model of consciousness, and it's really challenging these models of consciousness just emerging from, what's essentially 3 pounds of bacon fat in my skull,
or by electricity.
Well, yeah, it's electricity and chemicals,
right?
And, and that's a whole other thing. And, we talked about that a little bit in terms of the psychedelic revelations is, if you're going to say that, because people will often say experience things that we experience in psychedelic states, so, well, yeah, but of course you just put a chemical into your brain. But from a materialistic perspective, all of reality has a chemical basis.
Right.
And if you adjust the chemicals and you have a different experience of reality, how can I say that that's less real than the reality that I experience in my normal waking consciousness?
Right.
Right. I forget where I was going with this. I'm on a little bit of a rant, I suppose.
Maybe you wandered into the 8th dimension there for a moment.
Maybe. That's a dip down.
Yeah, I mean,
5D
Thomas
losers.
Yeah, right? I was like,
That'd be a great name for a band.
You're at 5D? You're just at 5D? Oh my God.
I know, right?
I'm at 13. 12.
Yeah, there's only 12. Don't exaggerate stuff.
There's only 12 where you're from. No. Thomas Nagel I think it was 2012 came out with a book called Mind and Cosmos, where he basically called for a new paradigm in consciousness studies, because he was saying that what we understand right now in consciousness just wasn't cutting it. We've been at this point in consciousness studies that is stagnant at this. It needs to go further, and this reductive materialism, it's not giving us the answers, answers. We have to go further. We need a change in the paradigm. And he wasn't suggesting anything himself other than it's time to change the paradigm. It's time to open up to the idea that we need something new. And he was met with, you can imagine what he was met with in the scientific community. It was just, kind of a shit show there. And since then, though, we have had a lot of new ideas come forward. And I think like panpsychism is one of the reigning ideas that there may be the universe itself is conscious. Consciousness flows through the universe, or we tap into consciousness. It's not something that is, it's not that the physical creates consciousness, but the other way around. The consciousness creates the physical. And it's an interesting idea. I don't know where that will go, but it seems to have stemmed from this idea that reductive materialism just can't give us the answers anymore. And the pushback against that is, well, we just haven't found it yet. It will. Just wait.
Mm-hmm.
But it hasn't. So I think I'm a little more. My interest is piqued though in panpsychism because
Okay.
I am there's different versions of it out there right now. It's not, it's by no means any sort of consensus science. I'm not going to you know say, oh, everybody run out there and accept this. It's great. There's just so much work to be done in that area, but I think it shows interesting promise to look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quaint. I'm an animist.
Well, I think panpsychism actually supports animism.
I think the difference, if I understand correctly, is, and I'm being just a little snotty here, but I know. Well, what do you expect from a 9D, consciousness?
Yeah, whatever.
You fiver.
I'm not even at 5D, okay? I'm sitting around in my 3D, like eating Cheetos, all right? That's where I'm at.
Well, but what I was getting at is that I think the difference is that with panpsychism, it still is kind of grounded with material. There has to be a material aspect to it. But when you look at the animistic, there doesn't have to be a material aspect. You can actually have non-material consciousnesses. And that's, I think that's if you really want to get away from the materialistic paradigm, you kind of have to go to that. And, it's interesting because, kind of just to go on the major themes that Steph was just talking about, for a class I'm teaching, we just finished reading Leonardo Boff's Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor. And Boff is a liberation theologian. And the Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor was deeply influential to Pope Francis when he wrote his encyclical Laudato Si, Our Common Home. And he uses that phrase in the encyclical, the Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor. But what was interesting is, because I had read the book before, and so I just reread it. But a couple of the things that we're talking about that Boff seems to call upon them. So one of the themes that we haven't really addressed, but is part of this sort of New Age ideology, is this notion of interconnectedness, that everything is interconnected. And, that's very ecological. But he also talks about, in a sense, a transformation of consciousness, that the earth is conscious. This is something that we haven't addressed. I'm trying to make a segue here, and I'm probably not doing the best job that I could. But he refers to Teilhard de Chardin a lot. And in Marilyn Ferguson's book, The Aquarian Conspiracy, she had interviews of people who identify as being members of this and what some of their influences were. And one of the most common people identified was Teilhard de Chardin. And I will say that I'm going to do probably Teilhard a disservice here in what I'm about to say, because it's been a while since I've read The Human Phenomena. But he was I think he was a Jesuit, but he was a paleontologist. So he accepted like the evolutionary model, but he had this sort of evolutionary model that the next step in evolution and consciousness as well is what he referred to as the noosphere. And that was almost like a collective consciousness of humanity that would envelop the entire earth. So to take it back to the technology for a moment, when the internet was first made public, a lot of people showed a interest in Teilhard in this idea of the noosphere, because they saw the internet. It's like, aha, here we go. The internet is the noosphere. And what they didn't recognize at that time, and there was a lot of hope, but what they didn't recognize was the cesspool that it would become.
Yep.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Commercialism.
I say as we're live
Capitalism.
streaming,
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
internet.
We're part
Like
of
and
it.
subscribe.
Part of the cesspool.
Yeah, like and subscribe, and you can actually donate money now. There's a little money thing on there too. So, help support my work here. But yeah, I mean, it's this idea that, and I think that there's value in that idea. And it's also deeply connected to this idea of consciousness transformation. You could not have had the computer revolution or even the development of the internet as it is without psychedelics. Because that was so influential to the people who were developing this. And it was seen as a kind of transformation of consciousness. And it was also this notion of social transformation, because the people who were developing this came out of the 60s in large measure. And they saw the internet as democratizing things, that it would give everyone a voice. And that this could be the great challenge to the powers that be. But what happened is we let the powers that be take control.
Yeah.
Or we gave even the cesspool a voice.
Well, and that's maybe that's like the shadow side of all of this, because you know, it's Go ahead, Steph. Yeah.
Well, what I was thinking was, you know, one of the things that people forget, it's like, and this goes back to the whole idea of 5D. Oh, we have to get to this 5D consciousness. It's this unity of love, peace, and happiness, and rainbows and unicorns and all the good stuff. And it forgets the fact that that's not wholeness. That's one aspect. Right. It forgets the idea that this shadow side, this darkness, is part of us. And when you do that, you eliminate that other side. You know, and you also start seeing things in binary terms, rather than a spectrum.
Yes.
And that's what life is. Life is a spectrum. It's not this binary love, peace, and happiness, and darkness and horrible hate and nastiness. It's a spectrum of all sorts of colors and grayscale and everything. And when we start bifurcating everything, we lose sight of all of the things. It's not just one or the other.
Right. And when you pretend that other side doesn't exist, in a way, you're also giving it control.
Yep.
Well, you know, a couple of things I want to throw in here with this is, one is that what I see a lot is, like going back to Boff for a second, and this pervades a lot of ecological and environmental literature, is the necessity of overcoming the dualisms.
Yes.
And as soon as there's like self and other, as soon as there's 5D and you 3D losers, that continues to be a duality, which continues to support the systems that are destroying the planet, right?
Yes.
But the other aspect that I would throw in, and this is also still in the shadow aspect of the New Age, is the terminology of conspirituality, where what is happening, I think, is, and it's so weird, I was really surprised to see this happening. Is that you have people who are part of the New Age, or at least embrace some of these New Age ideas, also falling into conspiracy theories.
Right.
You know, the model of this for me is the January 6th shaman. You know,
Yep.
What was it? Frangeli or something. Jake Frangeli, I think maybe his name. I don't remember.
I forget his name. Yeah.
But it's like, how in the world is this like shaman, someone who is self-proclaimed shaman,
Right.
storming the White? How does this happen? And I think it happens because there's this confusion of it's this idea of this transformation of consciousness and this idea of paradigm shifts where people are like, aha, I now see the truth.
Right.
But it's not a shift of consciousness. It's a shift of worldviews.
Right.
And I know a lot of people were like, at the beginning, were like, "Why, yeah, how is this happening?" But I'm like, well, if we go back to Marilyn Ferguson and her book, you know, it's in the title, The Aquarian Conspiracy.
Right.
That it seems like this is just embedded in the New Age.
Right.
You know, it's there, but we have to recognize that there's a difference. You know, we have to understand that it's not a shift of, you know, from this worldview to that worldview. And I think too many people they claim the enlightenment, they claim the knowledge, they just don't have it. Beware of anyone who claims to be enlightened.
Well, yeah, I think there's this claim, I did the research, and
Yep.
the research is basically reading somebody else's work that did the same thing. They didn't do research either. They may have made it up, or they may have done, looked at somebody else's research, or it's this like long list of going down the rabbit hole of someone who stole somebody else's work.
Right.
And then at some point someone made it up. And really it's just co-opting another worldview or what, another schema, right? It's trading schemas, no one's really doing the hard work. It's a bait and switch.
Right. Which comes back to me saying, which comes back to the idea that New Age in a lot of ways is a reskinning of Christianity. It's the same stuff, because there's a lot of connections between Christian thought and conspiracy as well, because we can see the real truth. If you're not, with Christ, or you're not a Christian, you can't see what's really going on. Same thing with a lot of other conspiracy theories. I know the truth. You don't. And so the New Age conspiracy idea is a similar idea. I can see the real truth. You can't. Which brings an arrogance as well, the 5D sneer.
Yeah. Yeah, we need humility, I think. Yeah, we definitely need a lot of humility.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, well, what I was going to say is that what seems to be necessary here is, the term is shadow work. And it was really interesting to me to reread Boff, because at the end he starts talking about an inner ecology. And it is really this, even though I think he's Jesuit, or comes out of the Jesuit tradition, he's actually mining, like depth psychology and talking about Carl Jung and this inner ecology. He even uses the Jungian terminology of individuation, that we have to become whole people. And it's this idea of not as above, so below, but as within, so without. And that's also part of this New Age idea. And I'm happy to see, people engaging in shadow work, or at least attempting to engage in shadow work. But there's a lot we have the path before us is long, it's long and hard. I think.
Yeah, and I think that one of the problems is so much is like you got these little kernels of truth. Like I think we can all see that there's an issue with our current world, right?
Right.
I mean, we can all see that there's a problem with late stage capitalism that is not working out for our planet. You know,
Right.
we've got a lot of issues that need to be handled that are causing these ripple effects across every aspect of our lives. And so it's easy to point the blame at, you know, this is the problem, or these people are the problem, or, you know, there's a lot of scapegoats out there, and that's
Right.
leading to a lot of conspiracy theories and all these different ways of, oh, I'm enlightened because I've run across this group and they've told me exactly what's going on.
Right.
And we're going to have to sift through and do the hard work and do, you know, a lot of soul searching, and that's really difficult to do when you've got kids and you got to work a job that's killing you, and it's much easier to just tune into your favorite podcast.
Right.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah. Well, I even think because the podcast is now eligible for monetization, so there's like super likes and stickers and everything. I haven't figured it all out yet, but
super like and give Nick money.
Yeah, like and subscribe, pay me. Yeah, so we're almost out of time. We're at an hour and 26 minutes. So let me ask if, because I know we could go on with this. It's such a rich area, and I think that as with the other episodes that we've done, it's kind of like an appetizer plate. You know, we're like, well, here's a little bit of appetizer, but we can go so much more in depth that we can have a full entree of the New Age apocalypse. But as we end here, let me ask both of you if you have any kind of final thoughts that you would like to leave with right now.
My only thought is how interesting it is that so much of it ties together. Like we touched on psychedelic apocalypse, we touched on AI apocalypse, and now we're just talking about New Age apocalypse. And it all kind of ties together in some ways.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Yeah.
Steph?
Yeah, I mean, it does all tie together. And, you know, I would urge people to be very critical of anything that they get involved with. To, you know, if something sounds weird, you know, do some research. Not do your research, but do some research on it. I don't know, just think about it.
Right.
And
rise to your 5D consciousness.
Rise to your 5D consciousness. If you can go higher, aim higher. No, it's all good.
Psilocybin has been decriminalized in Denver and Oakland and maybe a few other places. So, not that I'm suggesting that people do that, but you know, it's
especially places where it's illegal,
right? But you know, it's you know, breathe, do your breath work, meditate. That's a good place to start.
Start with meditation, and then
right.
Then go to find your 10D.
Yeah. I'll just say, you know, unless you've had a conversation with the self-transforming machine elves, you ain't 5D. You're nowhere near. You're nowhere near.
Right now, I'm with my 3D and Cheetos. I'm good.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Jeremy, I will post the link for Kill Devil in the show notes and video description. Encourage everyone to like and subscribe on Jeremy's channel, especially if you like rums and cocktails. He's the man to go to. And we will be back. I know that we missed last month. My goal is to get us on a really decent schedule for next year. So we actually have to talk about some of our topics. for next year. But the apocalypse isn't going anywhere. We're deeply embedded within it.
Until it actually happens, then we're...
Oh, it's happening. That's the thing. It's happening. I think that's maybe that's a whole other episode, but I think that too often people think the apocalypse as a very specific event.
Right.
And I don't think that's accurate. I think the apocalypse is something that we are in right now, and it's just unfolding, and it will continue to unfold, and we'll probably be dead by the time it ends.
Right.
But then there's going to be a whole different apocalypse from what comes next. So no shortage of topics.
Right.
So, all right. Well, thank you both for being here. Thank you for anyone who joined us today. It's I'm very, 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 very grateful. And this will be posted in the Rebel Spirit Radio channel on YouTube and made available to everyone until the end of times. So,
all right. Thank you, Nick.
Yes, thank you. All right, thank you. Until next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.